Please turn to page 22 for the Come Alive box. I'm starting on this page because I want to remind you that these two lessons, movie scripts and Come Alive boxes, are our introductory lessons to our narrative. We want to teach both these lessons so our students can do these activities on their own. In the previous video, I already covered the movie script. That's where we taught children through this activity how to have sophisticated sentences that connected together for exciting actions and reactions in their story. The next activity that we want to focus on is a Come Alive box. Down below, you'll see a sample of a Come Alive box that was completed. The first page on the left is the planning page. On the right is the writing produced from this planning page. The purpose of this Come Alive box, it is a reading and also a writing activity. And I suggest that you do the Come Alive box during your language arts time. In your language arts, when you finish reading a focused story, so let's say that you're using an anthology and you have a story that you are working on, after you read the story, this activity then will connect to comprehension for reading as well as an activity that will connect to your narrative writing. So you're going to get more bang for your buck using this one activity. So that's where we're going to teach this, and it's going to connect not only to comprehension and reading, but it's critical for our students to write their stories so that they're much more interesting and their characters come alive. So many times in the past, we would always tell kids, don't tell, show us who your character is. Show us the setting. And that becomes very difficult. Kids don't know what we mean by that. So let's walk through the steps to plan and write a Come Alive box so that your students will understand precisely what they need to do in order to show, that is, reveal their characters, what their characters look like, their personalities, their emotions, or to reveal the atmosphere or mood of their setting. On page 28, what you will see are two charts. The first one is a chant. I will teach you this chant, and this is how you will introduce the Come Alive box to your students. The 8.5 by 11 black line master of this chart can be found on page 32. After teaching the children the chant so they understand what a Come Alive box is, this is the chart below. These are the Come Alive box steps that students need to learn in order to make their own Come Alive boxes. This chart can be found on page 33. Many times before I start this chant as an introduction to what a Come Alive box is, I begin by telling the children, in the beginning of a story, that author better make that character come alive and that setting come alive. Because if that setting and character doesn't seem real, we don't want to read the book. It doesn't seem real. Who cares about the story? So what will we do? We will close the book. Every story has a setting and a character. Setting tells us time and place. Characters drive the action in a beginning, middle, end. And in the beginning, the author better make the setting and character come alive or we will close the book. That's why we need to make a setting and character come alive. Once we make them come alive so they seem real to our reader, they're going to care about the story. They're going to care about the setting and the character, and they are going to want to read. But if it doesn't seem real, who wants to read it? That's why we need to do a Come Alive box. So let's go to our chant. Take our fist and say, come alive, come alive. Make the setting. Let's pretend like we have a house for a setting. Make the setting. Then we'll put fingers waving like they're characters. Come alive, come alive, come alive. Make the setting and the character come alive. So there's our first part. Next, we're going to go to the setting. Mood makes the setting. So what makes the setting, everybody? I'm going to go up to the board, draw a house and a sun, and I'm going to say that's going to mean our setting, time and place. And what do we want when we have our setting? We want the mood. And mood is the atmosphere. Is it a tranquil setting and peaceful? Is it scary, adventurous, exciting? Is it warm and cozy? What kind of setting is in our story? And that's important because the setting is a clue to the reader about what's going on in the story. If it's dark and dreary, then we know something scary may be happening. If it's bright and sunny, something really exciting or fun is going to happen. So we have our setting. What creates our setting then? We're going to use the 5 senses, which will be used with our adjectives, but we're also going to choose precise nouns and precise verbs so that our word choice makes our reader see, think, and feel even more. If I was talking about somebody's stomach because they were hungry, what would be a better noun? Would it be stomach or would it be belly? Ooh, I think I would say belly. If I say stomach, what am I seeing, thinking, and feeling? I'm not really feeling anything. What am I thinking? Stomach almost sounds like something a scientist would say. And what would I see? I would probably just see a stomach, but I'm not really thinking much about it. But when I hear belly, belly makes me think more about food. I imagine food. I see this belly shaking. So belly seems a better choice. Every time we're picking adjectives, nouns, and verbs, we want to pick the best choice so that we can see, think, and feel closer to what we want our reader to see, think, and feel. It should match our story. The other thing that I want to do in the setting, once I start describing the different parts of the setting that are important to describe to create that atmosphere, I also want my setting, so I have 5 senses. I'm going to say plus, and then I'm going to put a splash here for FL, figurative language. Figurative language is only used when we want something to pop. So we're going to describe things in the setting, but we're only going to choose something in the setting that is absolutely critical, that needs to pop in the reader's mind. Otherwise, we don't use figurative language. That's the reason for it, to make an image, an idea, feeling pop in your mind. So we may say something like, her belly growled, and then we could use figurative language, a simile, like a bear. Ooh, that makes it pop in the reader's mind. The last thing we want to do for mood is add the character interacting with the setting. If I describe the setting by itself, I typically don't feel the atmosphere. I need to also have the character interacting with the setting. If I had a character walking into a haunted house, I can't just describe the haunted house. I need to have the character reacting to it. So as I say something like, Michael walked into the long, dark hallway. Every step he took made the floorboards squeak and holler. He quickly turned when he heard a loud noise behind him and thought to himself, oh no, is someone in here? Look what I did. I not only described the setting, but I had the character react. So the character could be thinking, saying, doing. You could talk about how physically they're reacting or their facial expressions. You want the character to react to that setting. And that's how we create the mood. So imagine when children are reading, these are the techniques they're going to find and discover and identify so that they can talk about the mood. Let's go to our chant again. Ready, everybody? Come alive, make the setting and the characters come alive. Mood makes the setting. Let's go to the character now. Make your arms like this, like you're an ape, and say, ape makes the character. Ah, so now we're going to put a stick person and write the word character. And what do we want from a character? We want to reveal who the character is. And when we reveal who the character is, we want to think of the word ape by describing their A, appearance. P, reveal their personality. E, reveal their emotion. So appearance is going to be 5 senses. We'll put our 5 with a eyeball there for 5 senses. Plus, let's put a splash for figurative language for anything to pop in the reader's minds. If there's something in that character's appearance that you want to pop, add figurative language to it so that the reader really notices it. It pops in their mind. So we have our 5 senses and figurative language to help the appearance of the character, their physical features, pop. P is personality. What type of person is this? Are they greedy? Are they kind? Are they compassionate? Or are they timid? What kind of person are they? And you can reveal their personality through their body motions, their physical motions, through their facial features, how they react to something, but mostly what they say, what they think, or their actions. And when I talk about emotions, it could be that they're happy, they're sad, tired, hungry, everything about how they feel. We have our ape makes the character. Let's go back because we have one more thing that we need to add in our chant. Ready? Come alive, come alive. Make the setting and the characters come alive. Mood makes the setting. Ape makes the characters, but actions, actions, actions make them come alive. Notice in the bottom of our chart, we're talking about how the characters' actions will make this whole come alive box seem real. And why is that? Because we don't want you describing everything about the character or the setting in a list. The actions make it flow. So you want to have some sort of actions as you are planning out your description. These actions should reveal the ape and the mood, the appearance, personality, emotions, the mood of the setting. So if I was talking about someone going in a haunted house, I'm probably not going to say they skipped down the hall or walked down the hall. Walk isn't a precise word. Instead of saying walked, I probably will want to say they crept down the hall. That action is tying into what's going on to the story. That word is precise. It matches what's going on in the story. We have our Come Alive chant. When we are planning a Come Alive box for the first time, we can introduce this chant, stop and explain the parts just like I did with you. But from then on, every time you do a Come Alive box, you would just begin the activity by saying the chant quickly as a reminder of the purpose of why we're doing the Come Alive box. Below this chart is the Come Alive box steps. These are the steps that you would walk through in order to teach your students how to plan and write a Come Alive box. Number 1, select your character and your setting. Think about the mood and ape the character. One other thing to think about when you're planning number 1 are the actions. Think of 1 to 3 actions that your character would be doing that would match the ape and the mood in that setting. So that right there is in number 1, mood, ape, and then think of about 1 to 3 actions that they would have that would match that ape and mood. Then number 2 through 6, develop the appearance. Number 7, personality and emotion of the character. And number 8, let's get started, choose a hook. These are our 2 charts to introduce and then the chart to follow the directions in order to develop a Come Alive box. On page 29, we'll begin our lesson. Down at the bottom of the page, you'll see this is where we are planning our Come Alive box. Notice in number 1, it says ape the character, plus think about the setting, the mood of the setting. And then we want to have 3 actions. First thing we have to do is just think, who's our character and where are they? Remember I suggested that you would connect the Come Alive box to your language arts story, the focus story that you were working on, which could be a short story or novel that you're reading, and you want to pull a character from that. In the beginning of the year, I usually suggest, let's go to one part of the story. Let's take our character right there and make our character come alive. What's the personality of this character? How do they feel in the part of this story? What do they look like? What's the mood of the setting? Let's use that to make our Come Alive box. As the year goes on, students don't need to do this anymore. They could come up with their own character and setting. In this particular example, we went to a part of a story that we were reading, and this part of the story was about a young, sweet little girl, and she was always nice to everyone, but whenever she got hungry, she always went a little crazy. So we are going to make that part of the story where we saw that she was hungry come alive. But we decided we were going to add completely different actions, that she was hungry and she went into the kitchen to see what was in the refrigerator and she got an apple. So that was what we decided. The same character, but we gave different actions to it. Do you see how you can adjust and change and do whatever you want? This is our first thing that we're doing. We're just brainstorming, coming up with our setting, coming up with our character, aping the character in the mood of the setting, and giving actions to it. We have a young girl. What's her personality? She's nice and kind, but how does she feel right now? She's starving and she gets a little crazy when she's starving. What's the setting? She's in the kitchen. Is there any really mood to the kitchen? No, it's just going to be the kitchen. So notice sometimes the setting doesn't have to have some great atmosphere. It's minor, so you don't always have to do that. The next thing we ask is, what actions are we going to have if she's hungry? Let's see, she races into the kitchen, flips on the light switch, runs to the refrigerator, opens it up, and her eyes start darting looking for some food, and she spots an apple. Okay, let's act that out. Ready? Run to the kitchen, switch on the light, run to the refrigerator, open up the door, see an apple, grab it, take a bite. There's our action. That's it. This is a come alive box. This isn't a story. You are pulling out a part and making it come alive. This is what we mean by showing the character and revealing who they are, not by telling. So those were our actions. We planned that. We talked about it. The next thing we're going to do is step 2, draw the character. Why are we drawing the character? Because this is a full-on description. And you can't just brainstorm with a bunch of words if you aren't visualizing what you're describing. So what did we do? We drew a picture, and we drew the picture to make sure that it matched who she is. Steps 2 through 6 are dealing with the appearance. And when I'm dealing with the appearance, label the nouns. So I go through and say, what nouns, what part of this picture is worthy of being described? What does the reader need to see? What's important for me to describe so the reader can see it, visualize it? So we went through and we labeled all the parts of the girl that we thought were important. Now, if something in the kitchen was important, for instance, maybe we drew the refrigerator here and we labeled that. We labeled that the refrigerator was important. I caution you, at the beginning of the year, you're only going to want to label 2 to 3 nouns. I did many more on this page, but at the beginning of the year, you don't want the children to have something that's so cumbersome and difficult for them to manage. You want to make this an easy, quick, come alive box. As the year goes on, you can increase those nouns. We go back and we labeled all of our nouns. Next thing we need to do after we label our nouns is we're going to add fancy words. That means we're going to add some adjectives. So you can get out your salt and pepper shaker, shake it on top of your picture and say, let's add some fancy words to those nouns. And what do we always ask the noun? We always say, what kind of, then we put the noun in our sentence, and then we put it in the context of what we are describing. What kind of bangs would this crazy, hungry girl have? And then at that point, we described what her bangs look like. What if the students are having difficulty finding adjectives for the different parts of the girl, of this character? Notice above, I have a picture of a word bank. This is for the appearance of a character. It has many columns of describing words that begin with what? Nouns. So I'll have columns that say eyes, hair, mouth, lips, and then different descriptor words to describe that part of the character's body because we're dealing with the appearance. This is a handy word bank that your students can refer to when they're describing the appearance of their character for their Come Alive box. So step 3 was add the nouns. Step 4, fancy words, adjectives. Above my nouns, I add the adjectives. Why? Because that's how we form sentences. Adjectives, nouns, verbs. What kind of bangs does the crazy hungry girl have? We could go to our word list and look under hair and find words there, or come up with our own. We said pointy. Pointy bangs sounds a little crazy and wild, so that's the most precise word and it matches our description of our character. Once we have all of our describing words for our character, let's turn to the next page for our next step, add more to the appearance. On page 30, we have steps 5 and step 6. Step 5 is actions. We already said what she's going to do. She's going to run in the kitchen, flip on the light, open up the refrigerator, and grab an apple. But we also want to look at, after our different nouns, do we want to add actions? So let's go back to all of our descriptors and see if we want to add verbs. You don't need to add them to every single one, but whatever would make sense, you do that with. So let's go back and say, her pointy bangs. What would her pointy bangs be doing if she was wild and crazy? Maybe they bounced. And make sure that you put this in the past tense because we are writing a story here. This is a part of a story and it should be told in past tense. Maybe we have her pointy bangs bounced, or her belly grumbled, or her squeaky shoes hollered. We could have different actions here to match her crazy, wild feeling that she has because she's starving. So you could go back and you could add those words like rumbled underneath the noun, or you could just go back and orally say them. So you decide. Sometimes we just add them by oral rehearsal and practice, and we don't write them down. Sometimes we write down a few ideas because we think they're so good. Ooh, let's put that one there. That one's really good. Let's go to number 6 next. We have our adjectives, nouns, and verbs. For our appearance, the last thing we need in number 6, which is our last step for the appearance, is does anything need to pop in the reader's mind? And what I suggest when you do this, because you're going to add figurative language, is that you only add figurative language to one thing at the beginning of the year. After that, if you want to add 2 or more parts of the character or in the setting, that's fine. But you also want to tell kids, remember, this is a powerful technique that you don't want to overuse or you will irritate your reader. Too much figurative language becomes overwhelming to the reader. You just want to use it sparingly for what needs to pop in the reader's mind. We went back to our organizer and we looked at it and said, what in this picture? She's starving, she's crazed. What in this picture should pop? And we decided, ooh, let's have her bangs pop, let's have her eyes pop, and let's have her belly, the grumbling of her belly pop in the reader's mind. So we chose 3. Again, I suggest that you only keep it to 1 until this becomes something that is easy for the children to apply to their papers. Her pointy bangs. So what are we talking about? We're talking about her bangs. Let's use a simile. And if we use a simile, it means that there's something, that descriptor, that pointy descriptor, we really want to pop in the reader's mind. So what's our descriptor? Pointy. We want that appearance of those pointy bangs to pop in the reader's mind. So I write the word bangs, then I write the attribute that they're pointy, then I put a line and a circle, and I say, what else in the world that has nothing to do with bangs or hair is pointy so that it could match what this reader's bangs look like? And the kids said, like a porcupine. Now what I love about the porcupine is that's an odd, strange looking animal. So it's not just that it's pointy, but it has that look of how the bangs look, how all the hair's sticking up, and that animal is kind of an odd, quirky animal. So it matches the personality of this character. That's not only revealing the character's appearance, but it's also revealing their emotion, what they look like through that porcupine comparison. So we went back and we said her pointy bangs were spiked like a porcupine. After we did the pointy bangs, which is a simile, we went to another part of the body and we did another simile. What are we talking about? The eyes. What are we saying about the eyes? What attribute were we talking about? Something that's big and round that seems to pop out at you. So we want something that's big and round. That was the attribute that we were looking at. Big and round. What's big and round? So her eyes, her big round eyes popped out of her head like, what in the world is big and round that has nothing to do with eyeballs? And the kids said, fists. So your fists are big and round and like they pop out of your head. So her big round eyes popped out of her head like two fists. Because two fists, what do? They're big and round, and what do they also do? They could pop, like they punch out of your face. That's excellent. Someone said, like bowling balls. Oh, we could use bowling balls because that would be wacky and silly, but look at the action of two fists. Two fists pop, and they're big and round. Which one would match this story best? I think the fist, because that looks kind of crazy, like two fists popping, but also it gives that popping image of that big round thing popping instead of just a bowling ball. So it adds more. So look how you get to that more precise choice for your similes. If we did use bowling balls, it matches the time period. If I was writing a Come Alive box and I was in a time period that dealt with, let's say, a pioneer, and their eyes popped out of their head, I couldn't say bowling balls because they didn't have bowling balls. So you want to make sure that your similes match the time period, match the situation, not just the emotions of what's going on that it matches, but also that it matches the environment and the situation that you're in. We then looked at our description and decided one more thing. Let's make the sound of the belly grumble. Instead of a simile, we decided this time that we would use hyperbole, which is exaggeration. And when we do that, what we said was, her belly is our noun. What 5 sense? What is it? What description is it in the 5 senses that we want to exaggerate so it pops in the reader's mind? So we're looking at a belly, and we want to exaggerate something about the belly, and we want to use the 5 senses. What it looks like, tastes like, sound like, no, the sound of the belly. So what was the sound? It rumbled. And at that point, we've identified what 5 sense are we going to use to exaggerate with? The rumbling of the belly, the sound of the belly. At that point, we can exaggerate. Her belly rumbled so loudly, the roof shook. So notice we're in the house, so that makes sense. And we're exaggerating, obviously. But it makes that whole idea of how loud her belly was rumbling, it pops in the reader's mind. They really can imagine that. We went back and we added our figurative language. Here we had our simile, here we had another simile, and at the bottom with the stomach, we had hyperbole. We used a simile and we used hyperbole as our figurative language to add to our Come Alive box. And I actually used these little techniques, these formula type techniques in order to make a simile. I put noun, 5 senses, exaggerate, a technique in order to create hyperbole. Those techniques are on my figurative language charts. These charts can be found on pages 44 and 45. They display different types of figurative language. It gives a descriptor of what the figurative language is, as well as the technique in order to help students create the figurative language. So if you notice, here I had who or what am I going to make pop in my reading? I'm going to make the boy pop in my reading. What attribute? That he's tall. What in the world is tall? A skyscraper. So then we connected together. The boy was as tall as a skyscraper. You'll see I had that formula for hyperbole. I had the noun, I had the 5 sense, and then we exaggerated. The dog smelled so putrid, it made the wallpaper peel. So we had our noun, we used our 5 sense, the smell, and then we had our exaggeration, the wallpaper peeled. At this point, we have finished the steps for the appearance. Let's go to the next page so that we can finish up our Come Alive box. On page 31, we have steps 7 and steps 8. Step 7 is just to add more. Do I want to go back to my picture and give more descriptions about what the character's body's doing to reveal their personality or how they're feeling? Do I want to just say how they feel? Do I want to describe something in the environment to reveal more about how they feel? Do I want to give them more actions? or have them say something or think something. In our case, we decided that we would have the character say something to reveal their personality and their emotion. We went back to the actions where we said, okay, the character is going to run into the kitchen, flip on the light switch, and maybe we're going to have them reveal how they feel right then and there by saying something like, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. So now they're revealing how they feel. And when they say I could eat a horse, okay, when someone says that, they are starving. And absolutely, the only thing on their mind is eating. Then they race to the refrigerator, they open it up, and maybe they'll say one more thing. Aha, there's a juicy apple. Or, aha, that's just what I needed to fill this growling stomach. We chose that we would have dialogue. We recorded our dialogue on our Come Alive box. We have everything on our Come Alive box except this top portion had to be filled in. And this top portion is going to be for the hook. This is where we're going to plan that starting sentence or sentences. And when we have our hook, we have 9 different ways that we could start this. So we know we're going to describe this girl running into the kitchen, flip on the switch, open up the refrigerator, grab an apple. How can we start this? It was late afternoon at Lucy's house when she raced into the kitchen, flipped on the switch, and headed towards the refrigerator. Okay, we could start with that. Or we could use the dialogue or thoughts. We could go down here and just start the whole thing with, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse, Lucy shouted. And that's how she started. Or she could have a thought. If I don't eat now, watch out, world, I'm gonna go crazy. So maybe that's what she's thinking in her mind, and you start the description that way. Or you could have the character interact with the setting. You could start off with, the room was dark, but the darkness wasn't going to win, because Lucy heard the humming, the calling of her favorite household appliance, the refrigerator. So we have her interacting with the setting to start off our description. We could just have her emotions. How does she feel? Famished, exhausted, and lightheaded. And then we could finish up with our action when we say how she feels. Maybe instead of saying raced into the room, because our emotions are saying she's famished, lightheaded, and exhausted, crawled into the room. Excellent. We could start with the background of the character. Some odd characteristics, something strange about the character that's just a nuance of her personality, or just give a brief history of something about her that the reader should know that could reveal more about this situation. So we'll give a history. Every day of her life, it always happened when the clock struck 3, Lucy's stomach took control of her. So there we have something that's revealing who she is through her history of something that's typical of her or odd about her. Let's go to the next idea to hook in the reader and begin that description, that Come Alive box. We could have a facial expression. Sweat poured down her face as her eyes darted across the room, searching for something to fill her belly. So we could start with just what her face was doing. Sweat was coming down, her eyes were darting around. Or what her body was doing. Her entire body trembled. She felt like she was going to faint. Or we could ask a question. How can someone so sweet and adorable become a monster every afternoon? These are techniques you could use for your students to start their hook. And you could just start with the first 3, and then every time you do a Come Alive box, you could add more, so that eventually they can look at this whole page and they can choose from the different ones to create their own hooks. This chart is on page 74. It is a fabulous tool for your students, once you've introduced these different techniques, for them to use as a reference so they have a variety of ways to pull in their reader to their Come Alive box. We've gone through all the steps to plan our Come Alive box. At this point, we are ready to write. We're going to read our paper over and over and over again, taking all these ideas. Maybe I'll say something like, famished, lightheaded, and exhausted, Lucy crawled into the kitchen. Then I would use all my ideas on this page. Maybe I could start with dialogue. She moaned, "I'm so hungry I could eat a horse." That's when she flipped on the light switch and headed towards her favorite appliance, the refrigerator. As she crept, her pointy bangs bounced up and down like a crazy porcupine. Her stomach started to growl, making the roof shake. Then she opened the refrigerator and her big round eyes popped out of her head like two fists when she spotted an apple. Notice I'm just going through and I'm practicing how I'm going to say this description. Oral rehearsal over and over and over again. Every time I go back, we're going to keep practicing this different ways until we like it. Once we like our Come Alive box, then we write it out. And as you can see below, we wrote out our Come Alive box here, and it ended up becoming, famished, weak, and lightheaded, Lucy crawled towards the kitchen for an afternoon snack. Her long black hair flowed along her shoulders, but her pointy bangs stood up like porcupine quills, alert and ready. Hunched over, her belly started to grumble so loudly, the roof shook. You can read on and read the rest of the Come Alive box, but the point here is we were orally rehearsing our ideas over and over again until we felt like this is exactly how we wanted to say it. So we were revising through the oral language rehearsal. Once you feel pretty good about what you're saying, then you say the beginning of your description and then you start writing it down. And when you write it down, you keep talking. So it makes sense. You hear what you're saying. It matches what you're writing. You go back to your paper, you orally rehearse it again and add the next part, go to your writing and write it out. That's our Come Alive box. As you can see, you want to have that direct instruction method in which you are teaching the children this whole group so that they understand how to make a Come Alive box. And as the year progresses, you're going to slowly release them so that eventually they are going to independently write a Come Alive box on their own. And you can have that as independent work connected to their language arts. It could be a homework assignment, but and here's the critical thing. This is so important for your students to understand this process so that as we head into the next section of our narrative writing lessons, that they have that technique of describing, making something come alive using this process. Because we want them to eventually just be able to do this with ease, master it so that it's just a natural way of thinking when they develop characters, a setting, anything that they need to describe in their story. If you've been doing movie scripts and Come Alive boxes, your children will write stories that will make characters in the setting come alive and seem real, and will have interesting actions and reactions throughout their entire narratives.